They have found 4 Sator Square, actually.
Yeah.
This is in this very temple. It was on a cluster.
Just like that.
This is a Roman inscription, and it could be like a code for the Christian.
Code.
It's for sure a soldier inscriptions.
Is it possible that Ségolène de Pompeii is right? Could this be a secret Christian code that was used by Roman soldiers? The Sator Square is made up of 5 Latin words: rotus, opera, tenet, arepo, and satyr. But the square is also a palindrome, which means the same words can be read forwards and backwards, top to bottom. Always the same. So rotus read backwards becomes satyr, and opera read backwards is arepo. But then, hinged on the letter N, the word tenet remains the same. This appears strikingly similar to the cross found in the cave at Jericho. In the church at Dura, people worshiped Christianity openly, but in the army, where it was illegal, they may have needed the square to communicate their secret faith. Perhaps the square is a code within a code.
At Dura Europa, we've seen evidence of the earliest Christian church, a place where they were baptizing people and gaining converts. But what about evidence of Christians in the Roman army? Well, they did find there 4 Sator Squares. Is it possible that as Roman emperors began to persecute Christians, the newly minted Christians in the Roman army adopted the square as their secret symbol? Is it possible that the army that had crucified Jesus was now spreading Christianity in his name?
Simca is searching for evidence that the same Roman army that persecuted Christians was actually spreading its teachings behind the backs of its anti-Christian emperors. So far, his investigation has turned up images that seem to be fusing Christian ideas with Roman sun worship, all found in military camps throughout the Near East. He has also found an ancient symbol called the Sator Square. Does this Latin palindrome contain a hidden code that was used by secret Christians in the Roman army? The answer may be found here in the ancient ruins of Pompeii. Once a center of Roman culture, it was destroyed in the year 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, showering Pompeii with fire and ash. Buried for almost 2,000 years under 6 meters of pumice, Pompeii is the perfect portrait of Roman life, frozen in time, just 49 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. In the ruins, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an ancient training facility for Roman soldiers.
What suggests that this is a military place?
We have a couple of graffiti on the columns here that do suggest that there were soldiers here. We're in what's been called a palestra or a campus. This could have been like the Campus Martius in Rome, where the military could go and practice.
Surprisingly, in the ancient graffiti that was etched into one of these columns, archaeologists discovered the oldest Sator Square ever found. The square itself no longer exists, but there's photographic evidence of the exact spot where it was carved.
That's the exact spot.
It is right here. It's as though we're looking at it.
To get to the hidden layers of the square, Simca asks Professor Benefil to explain the plain meaning of the words.
People have suggested that you could translate it this way. Sator, the sower. Arepo is not a Latin word, so it's been suggested that that's just a name. Tenet holds, opera, work. Rotos, the wheels. Arepo, the sower, holds the wheels in work. And it's thought that there could be a sense of, you must work hard, reap what you sow, all these different things. It doesn't make a fabulous sentence, but there's not an obvious meaning. And so
What's your gut feel? What's going on with this box?
I think that this was a game that anyone could play when you're relaxing or waiting in the shade on a hot summer day. And that's maybe why it got written up here.
So was the Sator Square nothing more than a game? A meaningless distraction for Roman soldiers with a lot of time on their hands? I'm not convinced. If it was a game, what were the rules? And how much fun could it be playing with a sentence that basically tells you to work hard? I think when it comes to the Sator Square, there's a lot more than meets the eye. But to prove it, I'll need a second opinion. And who better than an expert on ancient games?
Simca now travels to the British Museum in London, which houses the largest collection of Roman artifacts in the world. It's here that he meets with ancient games expert Irving Finkel.
The Romans liked to carve their war games in public places, on pavements and on stone, and sometimes the points of the game, instead of being just with dots or something, were actually laid out with letters which, read together, made sense. And then you encounter the Sator opera. You think to yourself, oh, this is some kind of 5x5 game. But I'm fairly sure that it's nothing to do with that whatsoever, and it has to be separated and regarded as an altogether different category.
Let me see if I understand. You're saying, given what you know about games, this is not a game?
I'm certain it's not a game, yes. Because the kind of place that it's found, coupled with the amount of labor it costs to carve it on stone, which is not a slight matter, means that it had more significance than that. And since the primary significance is so unclear, I should think the secondary underneath significance is the real one.
You think it has meaning?
It certainly has meaning, because you don't find lots of Latin inscriptions which are meaningless.
Dr. Finkel has confirmed Simca's original suspicions. The Sator Square is definitely not an ancient Roman game. But does it contain a hidden Christian meaning? In an attempt to decipher the square, scholars considered whether the surface meaning of the words were a diversion. So they scrambled the letters to see which Latin phrases they could build. What they came up with ranged from the political, the one in power is at fault, to the demonic, Satan, cruel in all your works. But most were simply absurd. He terrifies the rutabagas, leaving most researchers to believe that the square was nothing more than a collection of random words, chosen only for their ability to fit the design. To find out how random these 5 words really are, Simca has called on the help of computer scientist and medical research professor Michael Brudno, who uses mathematical formulas to determine the randomness of human DNA sequences. Simca has asked him to apply the same techniques to see whether the square's letters conceal a secret code.
You're looking for things which happen by chance very often and trying to tease apart, is there a hope of this being non-random?
Professor Brudno assembles a database of all the 5-letter words in the Latin language that can be read both forwards and backwards to see how many 5-word squares can be built. The results are astonishing.
So from these, we built 50,000 squares. So
50,000 squares.
So
That's a lot of
50,000
squares.
squares, that's a lot of squares. It's right now generating all 50,000 squares.
Of the 50,000 word squares that the computer generated, only the Sator Square's debatable message of holds the wheels in work appears to have any metaphorical value whatsoever.
So what does this tell you as a kind of pattern finder?
These squares are hard to build. With 21st century technology, it took us a couple of weeks to get to sort through all of them. The person who found these put in some time into this.
So it seems unlikely that the Sator Square was just a random invention. It must have had some kind of meaning.
What do you think?
I think the person came in with an intuition that these are the letters which I want. Because if he chose pretty much any other letters, the person wouldn't have succeeded in building the square.
So the Sator Square was not a Roman game after all. It seems to have had a hidden meaning built into it from the outset. But did that meaning have anything to do with being a secret Christian in the Roman army? To find that out, I'm gonna have to go to the other end of the empire, to the forts of Hadrian's Wall. If I can find the Sator Square there, then maybe I can prove that this is the cryptic symbol behind the spread of Christianity.
Simca believes that the Roman army that nailed Jesus to the cross also spread Christianity to the ends of the Roman Empire. It happened as a result of the sophisticated network of roads the Roman army built to flex its muscles over the people it ruled. The roads didn't just move soldiers, but also ideas, one of which was Christianity. So far, Simca has found evidence of Christianity among Roman soldiers serving in the Holy Land and nearby Syria. He's even found a mysterious symbol called the Sator Square that may contain a secret Christian message. But is there any evidence that Roman soldiers serving in the area of the Holy Land made it to the farthest reaches of the empire and brought Christianity with them? In Manchester, they found military discharge diplomas belonging to Roman soldiers from the 2nd century AD.
What have you got here?
These are very helpful because they're a snapshot in time of the garrison of a province.
Does the picture tell you of movement?
The name of the place where he came from doesn't survive complete. It would suggest he came from Heliopolis in Syria.
That's very close to Jesus' country.
Yeah.
We're talking 133, 132. Jesus was crucified in 33, which means that they could have come into contact with the very earliest Christians.
It is quite possible.
So soldiers from the Holy Land made it to England. But were they Christians? It seems at least some of them were, because there's evidence that Roman soldiers sent for and married Christian women.
This is the tombstone of a lady called Aurelia Aya. She herself came from Salonas, which is in modern-day Croatia, and that is one of the earliest Christian cities in mainland Europe. So that suggests that she may be a Christian, and the idea is then supported by the fact that she lived without blemish. It's an epithet which tends to be used in Christian contexts. So the information pulled together suggests that this is a Christian.
The tombstone shows us that not only was she a Christian, but she traveled across the Roman Empire to get married to a Roman soldier. It seems soldiers from the Holy Land traveled to Roman Britain, and some of them were sending for and marrying Christian women. But if the Roman army had a secret population of Christians, is there evidence of that in a military context? Simca now travels north to Hadrian's Wall, built in the 2nd century to defend against Celtic tribes from the north. Vindolanda was one of the military forts along the wall. It's here, in the soldiers' barracks, that archaeologists have uncovered the foundations of a Christian church. A Christian tombstone, crosses, and a so far undeciphered symbol carved into a portable altar. This sun cross reminds us of the ones we found at the cave outside Jericho and at Dura Europos. But it has evolved even further. It's now more like an abstract portrait of the crucifixion. Further evidence that Roman soldiers were fusing both pagan and Christian ideas into one, and that they were carrying those ideas with them to the farthest outposts of the Roman Empire. The most famous Christian in the Roman army is the first English martyr, St. Alban.
St. Alban is said in the accounts to have been martyred by Caesar, who caused this soldier to be arrested for being a Christian, refusing to carry out pagan ceremonies, and has him executed.
This story demonstrates why it was important for Christians in the Roman army to keep their faith a secret and share a symbol that no one could decode.
I think that the square is likely to be Christian. Christians would be able to use this as a secret way of communicating with each other.
To find that symbol, Simca now travels back to the city of Manchester. Once a western outpost of the Roman Empire, it's here that archaeologists uncovered the fragment of a Sator Square that just might be the oldest Christian artifact ever discovered on British soil.
So was this a big surprise?
You could say that, yes. It's one of those wonder moments for an archaeologist when you come across a find like this.
You've recreated that around that, eh?
We have enough there to enable us to be very confident in reconstruction. This is a very standard piece of Roman pottery called an amphora, and these were big storage jars which were used for olive oil, fish sauce, wine.
This kind of clay jug was used to store wine, and the fact that it has the Sator Square engraved right on it strongly suggests it had a ceremonial purpose. Maybe it was used during communion.
And the interesting thing with this find, it came from a rubbish pit between two buildings.
Simca now finds out that the rubbish pit was located next to a Roman military fort.
There would have been auxiliary soldiers bringing their religions with them, one of which would have been Christianity. So why not for a soldier to put this piece of graffiti on the emperor for a subverted religion that he totally believed in?
So you just look at it, it's some letters, but it could preserve somebody risking their lives for their faith.
I think it's remarkable that he's got such a small fragment, but there's such a big story.
In the centuries that followed, squares just like this one found their way to Roman forts in Portugal, France, and Hungary. Wherever the Sator Square went, Christianity soon followed. But can the secret message of the Sator Square finally be decoded? Simca has found the Sator Square in a Roman military context, at the farthest outposts of the Roman Empire in both Britain and Syria. He's convinced the square holds the missing clue of how Christianity spread to the Western world. But he still doesn't know what the square really means. To break the code, he's going back to where the earliest Sator Square was found, here in Pompeii. Back before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, Pompeii was the Roman version of Sodom and Gomorrah. The streets were lined with brothels like this one. The walls covered with bawdy frescoes depicting sexual pleasures that anyone could experience for a price. But not everyone in Pompeii was drunk on sex and paganism. Some people believed that Pompeii was going to be punished in the manner of the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah. Total annihilation. This piece of ancient graffiti invokes a curse against Pompeii, revealing a distinctly Christian point of view.
What do we make of that?
You always want to start with what's the clearest, and this is a cherem, C-H-E-R-E-M, is a transliteration of a Hebrew word. And it's often in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. So it's always used for divine retributions, just blotting out. And then poineum, it's written in Latin. It's an attempt to represent a Greek word, poine, a blow or a strike.
Ponium cherem, it means to strike with utter destruction.
Exactly. And these are the five-pointed stars, Solomonic, as if to bring power to a kind of a curse, maybe.
The harem curse was found in the doorway to this house. It seems to have acted as an amulet, warding off immoral activity. But who were the people who lived here? Inside, archaeologists found a fresco that depicts the owners, a man named Paquo Procolo and his wife. From the fresco, we learn that Paquo wasn't Italian. He probably came from the Middle East. In his hands, he holds Roman citizenship, given to soldiers after 25 years of service. But is there any evidence that Paquo Procolo was a Christian? From the Pompeian record, we learn that at one point he purchased a bakery. He then discovered that his building was adorned with pagan sexual imagery, which Paquo felt compelled to cover up, evidenced by the remains of white plaster. Then inside, above the bakery's main furnace, archaeologists uncovered a cross, strong evidence that this former Roman soldier was now practicing Christianity openly. Simca now wants to see if any other artifacts were found at Pakwo's house. Suddenly, he is presented with an inscription whose existence he was not aware of. Not a photo, not a fragment. It is the world's oldest surviving Sator Square.
Questo non è della stessa casa?
Sì, Paco proprio.
Ah, the same house, he said.
But they're saying that this Sator Square was found in the same house as the Cherem inscription.
This square is dated no later than 79 AD, just 49 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. And right above the square, we also find the image of the fish, inscribed in the same style as the one found at the cave near Jericho.
I think we found where the magic box came from.
Clearly, the square was no game. Here it was found in a doorway alongside biblical symbols and curses. We even know the name of the former soldier who inscribed it, Pakwo Prokolo. But we still don't know what it means. So Simca pays one final visit to Dr. Irving Finkel.
The likelihood is that it's an early Christian device in which they wanted to write the words Pater Noster in such a way that it wasn't obvious that that's what it was.
And you think it has Christian meaning?
Anybody who takes the effort to write an inscription has a meaning behind it. And meaning is sometimes transparent and sometimes obscure and sometimes both at once.
Dr. Finkel believes that the square refers to the phrase Pater Noster. As it turns out, when you reorder the square's 25 letters in the shape of a cross, using the square's only end as your axis, you can create the Latin phrase Pater Noster, which is translated as Our Father. The first two words of the most important Christian prayer in the Gospels. Arranging the words in this way leaves 4 letters outstanding, 2 O's and 2 A's, which seems to represent Jesus' famous lines from the book of Revelations. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. But there may be one other Christian message encoded in the square. It involves a repo, which is the only word that has no meaning in Latin. What if it is a mix of Greek and Hebrew, just like the curse found in Pakwo's doorway? In Greek, there is one word that sounds a lot like a repo. That word is Aleppo, which sounds like a Greek version of the Hebrew A, once again forming the Alpha and Omega. Using the word Aleppo would have ruined the palindrome, so the similar sounding Arepo was used instead. If this is right, the Sator Square's 5 words read, "The Alpha and Omega hold the wheels in work." In other words, decoded, the secret message that Roman soldiers were spreading is, Jesus makes God's work possible.